Okay, Angie, tell our listeners who our guest is going to be today. And I know it's going to be a very creative chat. It'll be creative for everyone.
It is. And today we're going to have Ken Bagnis. He's an author, a psychotherapist, and a musician.
Based on our earlier chats with him, I know he's going to have some interesting things to say.
Book authors are always so interesting to listen to their creative journey.
Hi, everyone, and here we are, celebrating what people love to do creatively by giving them a voice. I'm Rod Jones.
And I'm Angie Jones. Welcome to the Thought Road Podcast. We invite you to subscribe wherever you listen, and our episodes are always absolutely free to listen to. You can go directly to thoughtroadpodcast.com and listen to current and past episodes directly on the website if you don't want to go somewhere else.
Well, now it's time to hear your quote to get things moving in a positive way. Love your quotes.
Okay, great. Well, here is the quote for this episode. To write it, it took 3 months. To conceive it, 3 minutes. To collect the data, it took all my life. And that was by F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Scotty. You know, anybody that has ever written a short story or especially a book, they have to pull on all their experiences in their life. They have to have tremendous recall. And that's something that I think writers think about all the time.
Well, also, you can't help but have it affect you as you write because, you've chronicled this all in your brain. So it's going to come out as you write. You can't help it.
Well, I think he really nailed it because when you read his stories, a lot of it, he derived his characters from people that he knew or in some cases socialized with or even read about. And then he crafted his novel based on all of that information that he had. And I suspect every time he wrote a book, he got better at it. I mean, one would assume that's the case.
Well, you become more mature as you write, I think.
And you probably know how to use your history better. Your experiences.
Very true.
You probably know how to pull your experiences out from wherever they come from.
From your brains and from your ether and from spiritualness, I think everywhere.
Oh, and I want to mention too, all the people you've met along the way and all the people you've known.
Oh, very true.
There may be a quirky person in your life and you use that person to develop a character.
Very true. Okay, well, now it's going to be time for your Rod's motivational moments.
Okay, well, always look ahead and stop looking behind. And by that, I mean, I don't think people spend enough time looking towards their future. They think about things that happened to them in the past instead of focusing on what they want to accomplish, what they want to do today, tomorrow, the next day, the next week, the next year. You really have to look forward and stop dwelling on your past. I know some people celebrate their super successes that they had 20 years ago, and they share that with everybody almost on a daily basis. But that's really not the way to look at your life. If you can do it, focus on your future. Think about where you're going to head. Where you're headed, what you're going to do, all the exciting adventures that you're going to have in front of you, and stop dwelling on the past.
I read something recently that reminded me of what you were talking about. And that is that when you are driving in a car, you don't look in your rear view mirror all the time. You look ahead in the big window ahead of you. So I guess that's the way you have to treat your life. Look ahead, look at the big window, big picture in front of you, and stop looking behind you because you've already been there and you can't go back.
Yeah, you've been there, done that. And it's kind of exciting to develop those ideas and thoughts. And some of them, are fantasies.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Picturing yourself being on stage as a singer.
I was going to say Macbeth, but I think singer would be cool too.
Either way.
That would be very dramatic. Okay.
Speaking of moving forward, how about telling everybody about our new creative journal?
Oh, yes. I'm so excited to bring you, we are so excited to bring you a creative journal that we think will be extremely useful for anyone that's creative or anyone that's just trying to be creative. It's called the All Your Thoughts in a Row Creative Journal, and it's available on our website at thoughtworldpodcast.com, right on our homepage. So you don't have to look deep or anything like that. It's right there.
Well, you know what? I'm thinking it's a great way to wind down this year. Mm-hmm. There's probably quite a few entries a person can make as this year comes to a close.
Yeah.
And also starting the next year.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I suspect this would be a great gift item.
Yes.
And the fact that we have worldwide shipping is certainly useful.
Yes. I think anyone that wants to have a unique gift idea, definitely check it out. I think it's a really creative and really useful. And it's perfect for anyone who wants to be more creative. And Rod, I know that this morning we were talking about experiences in life that help to shape creativity. And you had some really cool thoughts on that.
Well, experiences in life, we all have them, some good, some not so good, but they all seem to bring out our true nature. Mm-hmm. And maybe sometimes we need to polish that nature based on some of the bad experiences we may have had.
Right.
But that is knowledge that's extremely useful. And I know it kind of goes against what I said earlier, but if you take some of those experiences that you had in the past, put them into a category of keepers or non-keepers, and then focus on where it is that you want to be, how you want to move forward in your life. Mm-hmm. And they can be very useful. They can be negative for sure, but there's plenty of happy ones out there. And of course, that's the ones you want to dwell on. If you're going to go in the past and you're going to think about things from the past, try to only zero in on the good ones.
Right. And then also, I think it's really important to learn from maybe your not so great experiences, because those are really the points in your life where you tend to learn like so much. And the good experiences, of course, you enjoy them and cherish them, but really examine your bad experiences. What are you supposed to learn from this? Don't just look at it as, oh, it's, a crappy, terrible experience and it was awful and, so forth. Look at it as, what am I going to learn from this? What am I learning? What am I supposed to learn so it doesn't happen again?
Well, and then it gets back to my motivational thing about focus on your future.
Right on. Exactly.
Dwell a little bit of time on the things that you've accomplished in the past, but really look heavy towards the future because it is your future. And like Genji made a comment earlier about your rear view mirror and looking through your windshield, there's a lot to see looking out the front.
Yeah, pick the windshield.
Yeah, pick the windshield.
Don't drive with looking through your rear view mirror.
Your little inky dinky
why?
Rear view mirror.
No. It seems that, if a person is highly skilled and talented in one area, it seems like it's not a terrible reach for them to pursue a creative outlet.
The history is full of them. There's been musicians that have turned out to be great artists. There are actually a lot of actors and actresses that have taken up painting and have become very successful at it. There have been chefs that have become actors.
That's very true. Vice versa.
Yeah, vice versa. So anything that you do creatively, and if you're pretty good at it, there's always the opportunity for you to explore one other avenue of creativity. Happens all the time. And some of the most accomplished people that you read about or hear about or have witnessed on stage, what have you, sometimes it's surprising to learn that they're very accomplished in other areas.
That's very true. And speaking of pursuing creativity in multiple outlets, it's time for our guest, Ken Bagnis. He's an author, a psychotherapist, and a musician.
Hi, Ken. Thank you for joining us today. We're always excited to have a novel writer and a psychotherapist with us.
Yeah. Hi, Ken. Looking forward to learning more about your creative journey today.
Hello. Hi, Rod. Hi, Ingy. I'm very excited to be here. I've been a big fan of your show ever since I listened to your interview with Ches Brodnick, the artist, and I've been hooked ever since. So I'm really excited to be here.
Well, thank you for mentioning him, because he definitely was a great interview, and he's been very, very popular. And if others had not heard that episode, they should definitely tune in.
Yeah, definitely listen to it, because it is fascinating.
But we know yours is going to be also equally as fascinating.
Agree. Okay.
He set the bar way too high. So
No. Everybody's so individually interesting, and their lives are so, interesting. I'm sure yours is going to be really fascinating for everybody. But
thank you.
You're welcome. Before we start the interview, we always ask our guests what they had for breakfast. So, Ken, what did you have?
Breakfast. I am a big fan of breakfast. I love breakfast, and it's, I think, my favorite meal of the day. Because usually lunch, it's just so rushed, and I just shovel something in my mouth while I'm doing 3 other things. And dinner is all about my kids, trying to create something that they'll eat. But breakfast is just for me, so I've kind of perfected the art of the breakfast burrito.
Oh.
And I had one of those this morning with some egg and cheese and fresh salsa. I like to add a little raw cabbage for crunch, and it was really good. And of course, coffee, but I skipped it because I didn't want to be too anxious for our interview. So I'll have some after.
Well, that's a great breakfast. I like the idea of putting cabbage in it.
Yeah, I do too. That's
we
a really good
burritos,
idea.
Usually for lunch we make them, but
we do.
What a great idea.
Yeah.
Well, Ken.
How about the texture? Yeah.
I was going to say, why don't we start by you telling us where you're originally from and a little bit about your childhood?
Sure, happy to. I grew up in small town Ohio, a place called Mayfield on the east side of Cleveland. And I love my hometown. Great people, interesting, fun weather. Actually, we had seasons there. We don't out here in Southern California.
No.
Some of the most creative people I've ever met came from there. I think because of all the snow and rain, people are kind of stuck in their basements working on their craft, practicing. So I think within a 5-mile radius of where I grew up, I've met some of the most amazing musicians. So interesting place to grow up. My house, however, was a bit chaotic. My mother had a lot of husbands. She collected them. There were a lot of, with that, a lot of divorces and a lot of moving from house to house and picking up and on to the next place. And there was always a consistent supply of boxed wine for her that she enjoyed and finished off. So from that chaos, I've had really a nonstop supply of ideas for my stories that came from that. So I am somewhat grateful now for that chaos. And it's no wonder I became a psychotherapist. So
psychotherapists seem to have that in common. At least that's what we've discovered. They had interesting childhoods, to say the least. Yeah. And Well,
I have a question. Do you think it's because the reason why you became a psychotherapist is to kind of have a semblance of maybe what you've been through in your life for yourself?
I think definitely that was part of it. I think that's why it connected with me. I sort of stumbled into it when I first started going down that path.
Yeah.
But once I found it, and once I started connecting with my clients, and I definitely think that there's a connection there between what I had to sort of deal with and where I am today. So definitely, that funded itself.
Makes a lot of sense.
It does make sense.
Did you have a favorite childhood memory?
Yeah.
Favorite childhood memory? Yeah, with that sort of chaos inside the house, I had in my backyard this magical portal, you might say. There were acres and acres of woods to explore. And my friends and I, we'd take our bikes as far as we could, and then we'd go on foot after that. We would just go down ravines and just get full of mud and dirty and all sort of creative play came from that. And we would make bows and arrows and slingshots and show back up at the house after dark, have to be hosed off before we came in. But I think that exploring and that fantasy, that was the most fun I had as a kid.
Well, I can definitely relate to that because that was very similar to mine. But I think the one thing that it does is it and it's worked out for your writing, which we'll discuss a little bit later. And that is your imagination. You kids are out there imagining all kinds of things and building stories around the adventures that you're having. That's really quite special.
So true. And pretending.
Yeah, we didn't have iPads back then.
No, you had fun.
You had fun, actual fun.
We had fun, and we had our comic books, and we were those superheroes, and we just went as far as the woods would take us. Sometimes, scared ourselves because we couldn't figure out how to get back home. But that was also.
Yeah, that's part of the adventure.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Those are sweet memories, though, really. And thank you for sharing them with us, because that's just so darling.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. And, when we looked at your website, it says that you started out as a musician. Tell us a little bit about that.
I did. That was probably my first big creative fantasy. I wanted to be a rock star. I used to sing along to my records, and I would look at the posters on my wall, and it dawned on me that at one point, every single guy in that Duran Duran poster, that Def Leppard poster, made a decision that I'm going to do this. I'm going to be brave. I'm not going to let fear get in the way, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a musician. And so I made a promise to myself that if the opportunity ever arose, I was going to seize it. And that opportunity came in a pretty odd way. I was in maybe the 9th grade, and I was failing Spanish class. So my guidance counselor said, "Hey, Ken, you got to do something with it. Go to Italian. That might work better for you." But I didn't do any better in Italian. So she kind of threw her hands up and said, "I've got to do something with you. Go take this wood shop / metal shop class." I'm like, okay, sounds like fun. So I went in there, and the dregs of the school were there. There's like 9th graders with full facial hair and leather jackets. And I was like, oh boy, I don't fit in here. And I sat at this table with the Duke Marsiglio and JC and these other guys, and they're talking about what brand of cigarettes were best. And I just was a fish out of water. But then they started talking about their band and how they were looking for a singer. And I don't know where I found that courage, but I said, I'm a singer. And it was like a scene from one of those old West movies when the guy walks into the saloon and the piano player stops playing and everybody turns and looks. And thank God they didn't ask me what kind of music I was into, because I would have told them like the Footloose soundtrack. Oh,
yeah. But, oh, no.
But they said, "Hey, you into Maiden?" And I didn't know what they were talking about. I said, "Yeah, who is it?" And they're like, "All right, cool. Come to Duke's Garage Saturday and No Flight of Icarus." I was like, "Yeah, no problem. I know that." So I went home and I'm like, "Mom, we got to go to the record store right now. I need Maiden." She's like, "What do you need that for? That sounds like horrible music, Kenny. I don't like that devil music." And I'm like, but I convinced her to take me. And I couldn't find Maiden, but I asked the guy at the counter. He said, Iron Maiden. I said, okay, let's see. And so he showed me the Iron Maiden records. And, well, my mom was right. These were terrifying album covers with
for sure.
A little dark,
blood and demons and hatchets. And so, but I bought that record and I went home and I listened to it over and over. And I wrote down every lyric of this man's beautiful operatic voice that I could never copy. But I showed up at Duke's Garage, and I remember it had to be 120 degrees inside this garage. And we were sweating, and we played the song. And luckily, they were as horrible as me, And we went through the song about a dozen times until I didn't have a voice left. And then finally, the garage door opened up, and all this cool air rushed in. And there was Duke's younger, beautiful sister waiting with a cup of iced tea, waiting to meet the lead singer. And I was like, oh, I found my identity. This is it. This is fantastic.
And your first fan.
Oh, yes.
It was the best. And so I was hooked. And so from then on, I was in one band after another until, after high school, I was in a band called Pretty Vacant. We got a record deal, which was unheard of in Ohio. And we motored west and we went on tour for a couple of years and landed in Los Angeles. And I'm still here today.
Wow.
God, what a story.
What an evolution.
Obviously, it was, fortuitous?
Well, it was meant to be. Really, the circumstances came up for you to meet these kind of guys that you really wouldn't hang out with. So it was kind of interesting that you stumbled into them.
Hey, wait a minute. I had 4 periods of shop in high school.
So what was your favorite brand of cigarettes, Rod?
Actually, I would have never graduated from high school had it
true.
not been those 4 classes in shop. But that's really a great story, Ken.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
The guys in my class were like secretly making throwing stars. I was out of my element.
That's metal shop.
I walked in with my yellow Izod shirt, and I just was like, okay.
You look like Ronnie Howard.
Exactly. Meaning the Fonz.
Yeah, as opposed to the Fonz.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Angie.
Well, your stories that you've told us, and I know you are also a writer. Can you share your journey into writing your first novel?
Sure. I mean, I think that was also another brave leap into the unknown, something I really wanted to do. I've always loved telling stories. And I was working here, at the Ansipi Clinic, and one of the guys on the floor, a really creative, interesting, great guy, his name's Darren. Mm-hmm. He's a filmmaker. And he was working on a movie called like Pumpkinhead 6 or 7 or 12, who knows. Mm-hmm. But it triggered a memory in my head of that small town in those woods and this urban legend of these creatures called the Melonheads that lived in the woods and would, hunt children. And I told him the story about how our babysitter played this elaborate prank on us and just how much fun that was. What a fun memory. And he heard that story and he said, that's better than what I'm making. You need to go home and write a screenplay and we need to make that movie. And I was like, I don't know how. He's like, just do it. Just start it. And it was the best advice I ever had, to just do it. Just start.
Right.
So I went home and I told my wife, I'm going to write a screenplay. She's like, okay, go for it. Opened up my laptop. I taught myself how to do that. And I started writing. And about 2 weeks later, he said, let's see what you have. And at that point, I was just like, you know what? You can't have it. It's because I kept elaborating on parts and it was turning into something bigger and very personal. So I told him it's going to be a novel. And then I had to really teach myself from the ground up how to do that. And I did. And that book I was able to find my agent with, which was a very daunting task. But I landed my agent and she fell in love with my writing. And but that book didn't sell. And then she told me to write what I know. Mm-hmm. And so what do I know? I know rock and roll and I know mental health. And that's when I wrote Mind Riot, and that one did sell. And that one came out about a year ago. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that later.
Yeah, we certainly will. But that's quite another one of those kismet moments, right?
Well, you are so tuned in, Ken. It is so amazing. Like your serendipities that happen in your life because you're so tuned into what your purpose and what your talents are, I think is so cool.
You have to be able to connect with that.
Mm-hmm.
Writing met a need for me, though, that the music never did. I really connected with writing. I really loved it. I don't know if we were ever great musicians, but I had the hair. So back then, that was important. It was like Johnny Bravo and the Brady Bunch, like the jacket fit, So I got to be that guy.
Well, the thing about writing is it's a solo event, and it's all up to you. You don't have to depend upon your fellow musicians or anyone else. You stand on your own. You either make it or you don't. And that in itself is challenging, but also I think that's the most rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
True. Very true.
You've been quoted as saying, and I quote, "I was always able to define my identity or connections with others by embracing my creative interests. I wonder if that's common with creative types of people." That's quite a quote you presented there, Ken. What did you mean by that?
I guess what I meant was, personally, when I embrace my creativity, it's always kind of given me credibility in social situations. If I'm at the farmer's market and, I meet this new family and they eventually gets to, what do you do? If I say, I'm a psychotherapist, and I write young adult novels. Oh, well, that's really interesting. Tell me about that. And all of a sudden I'm cool. I've got this in this social situation. And the same went back with the music. It gave me a connection. I just always found it easier to connect with people through my sort of creative endeavors. And, most of it's just sort of stumbling bravely, into these creative endeavors, and when it works or sort of works, it helps me socially.
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
I wondered if other people have that experience.
Well, I think if we're at a cocktail party and somebody says, "Oh, what do you do? What do you do for a living, or what line of business are you in?" and you say, "I'm an insurance salesman," or worse yet, "I sell real estate," they go, "Oh, that's interesting," and then they walk away from you. And I suppose that's probably true to some extent if you say you're a psychotherapist. But if you say you're an author or an artist or a musician, all of a sudden people want to know more. So I could see you getting a lot of personal gratification and feedback off of that.
And there's some mystery to it too, I think, because not everyone's the same, even if you are an artist, a musician, or an author or a writer. So it's very different. So they want to find out you and your personal story. So there's a lot of mystery there.
It's always interesting if you say that and the other person happens to be a New York Times bestselling author.
And you're like, I'll go home now.
And they go home.
Yeah, that will happen. But I did get recognized for the first time. I was out with my kids, and another father pushing a stroller said, "Are you the author of Mind Riot?" And it took me back. You could have knocked me over. I said, "Yeah, I sure am." And then I hope he liked it. He said, "I recognized your picture from the back of the book." And we started talking about writing, and he's working on his first novel, but that was fantastic.
No kidding.
That is so neat.
And
good for you.
You heard it here first. It's really important to have your mugshot on that jacket of your book.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Another thing that we heard you say is the excitement and fun that comes with the big payoff after a creative endeavor, looking good beyond the intrinsic value and pleasuring the extrinsic reward, like seeing your book in a bookstore. Share with us your thoughts on that, Ken.
Yeah, I think, these amazing artists, like going back to Ches Brodnick, he gets a lot of intrinsic reward from his art. He could do a piece and meet all of his needs and, maybe put it in a closet. And that's not me. I'm very sort of extrinsically driven. I've always been. Mm-hmm. If I'm, drawing a crayon cartoon with my kids on the dining table, afterwards I think, what if I should get a frame for this? And maybe I should get an art agent, but joking. But
that's so sweet though, really.
But having that big, because there's a lot of work that goes into writing a book, and the several different versions and edits and on. And I'd probably still be working on Mind Riot if it wasn't published. But I got a text from a friend who was at my absolute favorite bookstore called Romans in Pasadena. Mm-hmm. And she's like, "Oh yeah, I just picked up your book at Romans." And my book is at Romans, and I dropped everything I was doing. I rushed right over. This was right when they started letting people back in after COVID, so I hadn't been in a while. Mm-hmm. And there was my book on the shelf. And I was just manic with joy. And I talked to the staff up there, and they had me sign all the copies, and they put stickers, signed by the author. And it was just such a treat, such a joy. And then I did a photo shoot with my book. I walked around the store and took pictures of it with various other books.
Of course, yes.
Take a picture of it next to the Stephen King novels. Why not?
Oh, that's excellent.
Gosh, that it must have been exhilarating to see your book there at Romans, because that's a big bookstore in Pasadena, really big.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't get to do the traditional release where you get to go to a bookstore or 10 and release your book and sign books and meet some readers. It was the middle of the beginning of COVID, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but it did really well. I think that the mental health aspect of the book really resonated with people, especially during the pandemic. And quite a lot of people picked it up.
Very timely.
I could see that, yeah, especially for young adults. This was like really going with what's going on at the time.
Right.
Author mixes psychology with rock and roll in new novel. That was from one of your press clippings. What did you think of that headline and what they wrote?
If I get any press, I'm thrilled. And I'm cutting it out and I'm taking it to the frame store and it's on my wall. Because again, the whole extrinsically driven thing. But I think that's pretty accurate. I just always described Mine Riot is School of Rock meets One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And the one thing, I think the most important thing my agent taught me is, to really write what you know, so it's genuine. And I certainly know those topics well. And I think it came out pretty authentically.
Well, I read that and I thought that was really a great article. And I think they captured your book handsomely, if I may say.
They did, but I'm going to make a comment. I feel like you really celebrate your creativity. Like if you get a clipping or if you have like a really cool experience, and that's just like you celebrate it. And that's such an important thing. And, some people are more quiet about it, but it's really cool. Do you feel like you're being, a little too egocentric when you do that? Because I don't think so. I feel like you're just being joyful and happy,
It's like running through the woods and celebrating with your buddies.
So cool.
Absolutely. No, there's lots of dancing when things like that happen. I just why not celebrate these milestones and these achievements? I think we should all celebrate those things, if you get your painting in a gallery, show up and have that glass of champagne and take a picture next to it. And, you worked hard. Enjoy this.
Exactly.
That's what I think anyway.
Well, those are defining moments in your creative life. It's like keeping a little ledger of what you've accomplished.
It's like, yes.
And it also is your hero book. It's fun to go back and take a look at your accomplishments because hopefully it'll motivate you to continue to do more.
Yeah.
I mean, after these articles and after you discovering your book in the bookstore, that's encourage you to write more books, but maybe more importantly, it's going to convince somebody else that they should sit down and write a book to do the same.
Kind of like when you had the posters on the wall and you're like, yeah, I can do this. It's the motivation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can do that for others as well. It kind of leads me to the next question is, how would a psychotherapist define creativity?
A psychotherapist? A psychotherapist would probably say something way too wordy and add the word algorithm. I would define it as like, I'd say imagination or dreams, just sort of bravely and most of the time painstakingly brought to life. And if you could do that over and over, it becomes an incredibly durable trait that could flow over into every aspect of your life.
Very well put.
And then all of a sudden, making dinner for your kids could be creative and fun. And, playing with your kids at the park could be creative and fun. It adds so much spice and interest to life.
Oh, you're so right.
I guess that's how I would define it.
You're so right. I love it.
And I won't use the word algorithm.
I love it.
Good, because I don't know what it means anyway.
Yeah, you see.
When you're practicing your profession, I'm sure there are times when you would rather be writing. How do you balance those two in your thinking?
I would rather be writing most of the time, to be honest with you. But it's important to stay focused. And with my clients, they deserve that. They absolutely deserve that. So I'm as present as I can be for them. But I've also had to develop this sort of, I call it ninja writing, where if I get a lunch break or if I'm early for an appointment, I'll yank out my laptop and I'll just write for 15 minutes or 10 minutes, turn it on. And I think I've gotten good at turning it on and then turning it back off so I could focus on something else.
You taking the time just to make those quick notes. And then also when you go back into your practice, you have that satisfaction of knowing that you moved one step further into your writing. So I suspect those two kind of balance each other out.
Yeah. And I like the fact that you are taking little like snippets of time just to write. And I've been hearing about that. And it's so inspiring to hear you do that because everyone's like, oh, I don't have time to write. And just taking 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you have. It's like, thank you for that, Ken, because that's such an inspiration in itself.
Well, and the fact that you're actually putting it into a computer instead of a yellow sticky note.
Yeah.
I have those too. I have books, little notebooks. I've got my little programs on my phone. Sometimes I'll stop halfway through a run because an idea will hit me. and I have to stop and write, and that's okay. And if it's at night and I'm working on a chapter and I write 2 words, I don't judge myself. I'm like, those are 2 good words and good for me. Or if I write 2,000 words, then okay, well, I'll probably have to get rid of 3/4 of those, but good job. So whatever you do, it's great.
Well, you're in good company, because that's exactly what Hemingway did. And he felt if he could get down the perfect sentence or just 3 good words, and he'd walk away from it. So you obviously are
like minds, huh?
You're like minds. You're well on your way.
Good company.
Yeah, you're in good company.
I was thinking back to your band career in the 80s. Ken, what was the most valuable thing you learned from that period in your life?
You said this was G-rated, right?
Yes, the G-rated stuff.
Well, I did learn a lot about sort of maybe the dangers of excess, and how to avoid falling down that trap, and the value of connecting with truly amazing people. I made friends back then that I still talk to just about it every week, and we're still connected. So lifelong friends came from that. So I think those things I probably learned. I'm sure I learned a ton.
Yeah.
I met my wife back then. So that was the greatest thing I think I accomplished back then, and I learned.
That's wonderful that you guys have been together for so long. My goodness.
Yeah, we met outside of Gazzari's on the Sunset Strip. And Gazzari's hasn't survived, but the marriage does. So.
There you go. That's the way it should be, though.
I have to say that I don't think anyone who has ever written a book has not discovered something about their own personal life. What stands out the most for you?
That's a good question. I think writing, I'll go back to Mind Riot. So the main character's mom is very much based on my mother. There's no way to avoid seeing that. Mm-hmm. And when my agent read it, she said, "Shit, this is a great story, but that mother's a dumpster fire. No one's going to buy this. No one's going to believe it." I mean, you haven't met my mother,
Yes. Oh my goodness.
And I just sort of, and there were all those funny stories, and there were the drinking and the chaos and the men. But getting into writing her character, I think that I discovered, that how hard she fought through the string of events that probably would have broken a lesser person. She was really strong. She raised 2 kids. Her husband died when I was 3, and Kevin, my brother, was 1. So she had to pick up the reins and find work and find a life. And she was just always writing her character, and she just realizing that she was eternally my champion. Always so proud of everything I did in her own, way. So I think I discovered that.
That's really, she was really a strong lady despite some of the issues she had, because back in the day, I just saw something on Facebook that I didn't even know, where women couldn't have their own checking account. They couldn't have a credit card. And this was the time probably that she was, because that was pretty recent that came into play, where women could do that. So for her to be able to take the reins and do that, she was dealing with a lot of women don't do this and that stuff at the time.
She had the responsibility of raising 2 very young children.
And having 2 kids. Yeah. So that's really hard.
Yeah. That's not an easy task for anyone.
Really hard.
Yeah. So I do appreciate all that she went through for us.
Yeah.
I learned that from writing the book. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. I mean, that really puts everything into an intense focus. So you really,
a little self-therapy.
Yeah, kind of, I guess.
Yeah. Well, sadly, she passed away right before the book came out, because she would have been so excited. I did show her an early draft of it, and she read it, and I was very nervous that she was going to recognize herself. But she was like, I'm like, "So what'd you think of that, Mom?" I thought it was funny, Kenny. Very good. I'm like, "You didn't recognize yourself in any of that?" "What are you talking about? That's not me. I would never have done that." She didn't see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's okay, but she recognized her son's talent, which is very good.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's what was important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Okay, so Ken, now we're going to put on our philosophical hat for a moment. And can you tell our listeners what you'd like to teach them about living the creative life?
Philosophical hat. I think I mentioned this maybe a little bit earlier, but just stop talking about it and just start doing it. I think that everyone is creative, and fear blocks you from reaching their goals and my goals, and just gets in the way. And fear is boring. Creativity and projects and whatever it is cooking or writing or painting. That's excitement. That makes life worth living.
Absolutely.
So that's what I would say. Just stop talking about it. Start doing. You'd be surprised how many people I meet that all have a novel that they're ready to write. Mm-hmm. Great. Just do it. Just sit down and go. And you talked about the excuses, and that's fear. And if you can get past the fear, then life gets interesting.
Well, I think every creative person hits that period of time when they have self-doubt, and getting started is the hardest thing. Going back to writers, they'll often say, I'm not going to write all night. I'm not going to write for an hour. I'm not going to even write for 10 minutes. I'm just going to write one sentence, and then I'm going to get up and leave. Invariably, they'll sit there and write 10 paragraphs. Or it's like a runner.
Right.
A runner says, I'm just too tired. I'm not going to run today. And so what does he do? He puts on his tennis shoes. He puts on his running clothes. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm only going to walk to the front door. Well, I'm only going to run, just down the street. Right. And before you know it, he's run 10 miles. Yeah. So I think writing or any kind of form of creativity is all about what you just defined, Ken, so eloquently, is just do it. And it's kind of a hard thing to do. But once you start, the flow comes.
Yeah, that flow.
Yeah. I mean, you would probably understand that more than most people because of how you got indoctrinated into singing and writing, for that matter.
True.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's, singing in that garage or sitting on my sofa writing a book, it feels like 30 seconds have passed and it's been 2 hours. That's that flow. That's when you're in that creative, wonderful magic zone.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Joyful. What do you see yourself accomplishing over the next 2 years?
2 years isn't a ton of time in the life of a novelist, but I would say Break, my new book, Break, that'll be out. That was supposed to be out this week, but because of COVID supply chain issues that's affecting everything, that release got delayed, and it probably won't be out until, I think they said May. But that's okay, because now I have more time to polish it and work on it. And editing is really my favorite part of the process. The hard work's done.
Well, that's interesting, because that's probably the least favorite for me anyway.
Same here.
Tell us the title of that book again.
Break. And that's the story of, it's another young adult novel. A 17-year-old has his first psychotic break and has a very dramatic run-in with the law. And he winds up in an adolescent psychiatric facility where he's sort of restrained to his bed all night. And when they finally let him up, he's lost and he's scared, he's confused, but he meets this girl who's quite a character, and she convinces them that everything he's experiencing is real, and he should escape with her. So a stolen car and intentional kidnapping later, there's this Bonnie and Clyde adventure across the Southwest United States. So that's what that one's about.
That's going to be an interesting book.
That sounds really exciting.
I see a movie.
I do too.
Oh, it's so cinematic. That would be great if that could happen in the next 2 years. Let's make a movie.
Yeah,
we'll put it out there.
We'll put it out there.
Yeah, we'll put it out there.
I'm sure, knowing how your life has gone so far, Ken, you'll probably stumble into a director, and he'll say, "I've been looking for you. I read your book. I read your reviews. Come to our studio. We're going to start scripting it."
Yes.
Wow. Well, I hope they have.
Oh, by the way, here's your advance check.
Yeah.
I'll take that. Please. Yeah. I thought of the craft services. That sounded exciting too.
That's our daughter's favorite.
Yeah,
the craft
seriously.
services.
Okay, so now we're going to ask you the question we ask all of our guests, and I love hearing their response. And that is, if you could sit on a park bench and chat with anyone from the past, who would it be?
Well, I was going to tell you all about my park day with Benjamin Franklin, because I just finished his biography, and what an amazing man he is. Brilliant and fun. But I think I'll give you the sentimental answer. And I think I'd pick my father. You know, I mentioned he died when I was 3. So yeah. I think it'd be good to catch up with him and hear his story from him, because my mother isn't a great historian. I've heard several different stories. And I'd like to tell him that, you know, his kids turned out okay.
I think he would be extremely
so
proud.
Oh my!
And what's very interesting when Angie asks this question, it's always surprising to me how many people always refer to a parent or a grandparent.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
I think that makes me feel good that they do that.
Mm-hmm. And I could see why you would want to. I mean, you lost him so early on. You have a lot of catching up to do.
Well, you don't really know his history.
His story.
Yeah, you don't know his personal life and his personal history. And I highly suspect he would be or is extremely proud of your accomplishments, Ken. He couldn't hope for a better son, but I'm sure your brother's a good guy too.
He's all right. No, he's great too. Well, thank you. It's so nice of you to say that. Thank you.
Well, this is the part I don't always like, Ken. Thank you. Anyone listening to this interview could not help but discover some aspect of living more creatively.
Yeah, true.
You shared your thoughts in a most compelling way. And this has been a great interview. You're very genuine. And I know that meant a lot to both Angie and I to have you as a guest.
So appreciate it, Ken. And thank you for sharing your thoughts about creativity today and sharing your creative journey. And now comes the time that I let everyone out there know. If you want to know more about Ken, we will have links for him under our show guest tab on thoughtroadpodcast.com. So you can learn more about Ken and connect with him on social media.
Plus, we'll put all the information for your upcoming book.
For upcoming and also for Mind Riot as well. We can put all that on there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you guys so much. This was fun. Now I could go have my coffee. And I wasn't anxious at all. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. And it's such a great topic, creativity. And I'll be listening to your future podcasts.
Well,
thank you so much. You're a great guest.
And a great guest, and we really appreciate it. So goodbye for now, our friend.
Bye-bye, Ken.
Goodbye for now. Thank you.
Today, we're going to do our first shout out.
Yes.
And it's to or for the Sassy Museum of Art.
Yes, it's an art museum located in Southern California. So if you're here in Southern California, you can go visit. Or if you're not, you can go online and check them out at sassyartmuseum.org. And that's spelled SASSE, artmuseum.org. And you can sign up for their newsletter. And they have new exhibitions that they do also include online that you can check out.
Yeah, and their books. They have books digital downloads that are pretty fascinating. There's one that they're just releasing soon on trees. And it's a combination of trees and poetry. I'm anxious to see that one myself.
Yes, and it's got a gorgeous cover on it, and I think you guys will really like it.
Yeah, so please take the time to check them out. You can also connect with them on social media.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you tuned in today. We hope you enjoyed the thoughts and ideas we shared with you.
We post a new podcast every week, so remember to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. So it's bye for now from my husband Rod and I, wishing everyone a great day.